What is up YouTube, and welcome to this Avengers Infinity War video. So if you are new to the channel, please do consider leaving a like and a subscribe down below if you did enjoy the video. So Avengers Infinity War is out now worldwide and it is amazing. So first of all, there will be spoilers in this video for the movie, and if you want to see a spoiler-free review, you can go and check that out on my channel, and you can also check out my spoiler review as well, where I discuss where the MCU may actually be going next. So the movie starts off with where we left off at the end of Thor Ragnarok. So if you remember, the Asgardians were on their way to Earth to hopefully create a brand new Asgard. Now this did actually happen in the comics, and after the events of Ragnarok, they actually went off to actually create a new Asgard in Oklahoma, which it seems like they probably won't happen here, although it just seems to be all of the Asgardians were actually killed because Thanos actually blew up the ship instead of just leaving simply half of them. So I guess he really did hate Loki that much. Now, speaking of Loki, we actually had a interesting thing here, a callback to Avengers. So one of the best scenes in the Avengers in 2012 was to actually see Loki to go head to head with a armorless Tony Stark as he tries to bring him and beguile him under his spell using his staff. It didn't work, and well, Tony Stark says that they have a Hulk. Now Loki actually has a Hulk himself now, so he unleashes the Hulk on Thanos, who proceeds to easily dispatch the Hulk using some real cool UFC moves. I think Thanos could make a big move for the UFC heavyweight title there. But next up, we've also got a replacement. So Silver Surfer is over at Fox and cannot be used in the MCU just yet, which is a real shame, because the infamous image where we see Hulk blown through into the Sanctum Sanctorum thanks to Heimdall sending him through to the Bifrost, rest in peace Heimdall, you will be missed. Well, it was actually Silver Surfer who crash landed into the Sanctum Sanctorum and actually warned of the threat of Thanos, which is pretty cool. I really did like that. Now next up, just before the flood, before everything goes off, we actually see Pepper Potts and Tony Stark arguing once more. Now, if you remember at the end of Spider-Man Homecoming, he actually says, and after Spider-Man gracefully actually refuses to become an Avenger and take the Iron Spider costume, he actually whipped out the ring, or at least Happy Hogan whipped out the ring, and they are now engaged. But he mentions a dream he had where they're going to have kids, and he mentions the name Morgan. Now, there was actually a Morgan Stark, and he was the cousin of Tony Stark, and he hates Tony in true comic book fashion because he feels like his father, or Tony Stark's father, cheated Morgan's father out of the business, and they go off to fight. And Madame Mask actually convinces Morgan to use an item called the Visio Projector to drive Tony Stark mad. Now, finally, we also get the Spider Sense. The Spider Sense finally appears in the MCU. It wasn't in Homecoming, but I imagine as he becomes more in tune with his powers, Peter actually understands and gets this sense that something is wrong as time goes by. And what is really cool is the speech he gives back to Tony Stark, saying that how can you be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man when there is no friendly neighborhood, or no neighborhood at least. And that's a callback to the comics, with his title being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And of course, we see Ned Leeds with Stan Lee was actually driving the bus that he was on, which was absolutely awesome. I loved every single part of that. And we actually see the Iron Spider suit go towards Peter as he's trying to get on the Q ship, which is the Iron Spider suit given to him during the Civil War storyline. So during the Civil War storyline in the comics, we see the Iron Spider suit given to him as Peter picks Tony's side until he switches sides, of course. Again, in true comic book fashion. And the weird sort of leg, arms, whatever you want to call them, on his back, they are very true to the comics as well. And we've also got Nomad. So Captain America, we find out as he has been disavowed, he has been off doing his own missions, and General Ross, or Secretary of State Ross, I believe it was, he mentions in Age of Ultron. Well, he's not happy with him at all, and the last few years he has been going off and doing his own thing, just like he did in the comics when he was kind of jaded with the US government. He became Nomad. Now, another shocking one, which I did kind of predict in my videos, that Peter Dinklage would actually be Etri, the dwarf king of Nidavellir, and I love the fact that Drax was just like, yeah, that's just a made-up name, that's just a made-up word. That's just absolutely hilarious. Drax, I don't usually find Drax funny, but he was really, really on par here. It really was good. And it was also the place where not only was the Stormbreaker created, but the Infinity Gauntlet was created as well. Again, Thanos didn't leave half of the population here alive either, so it's a bit weird. 2 people so far in the Asgardian kind of the 9 realms that he hasn't let them live. Maybe he knows they're just too dangerous. But Stormbreaker is created, the all-powerful weapon, which was actually given to Beta Ray Bill, a character who actually came across the hammer of Thor and then later proved himself worthy, so Odin gave him a weapon similar to it called Stormbreaker. Now, one thing I really liked here was the misdirection with the Collector. We thought that the Collector was going to be killed on screen, but he wasn't. It was actually a reality trick, and as the Guardians are walking through the collection, we actually see a blue person, and it is actually a character from Arrested Development, Tobias Funke, the analytical therapist. I'll let you make the portmanteau yourself there. But again, as well, during the fight on the Nowhere, which they're going to Nowhere, what? That was hilarious. And Mantis and Drax are turned into ribbon or kind of elastic and blocks, respectively. And Thanos actually does this. He actually does this with the gauntlet to Eros and Nebula. So Nebula was actually tortured in the comics, quite similar to how she was kept here. While she was burnt and kept alive, she is kind of taken apart here by Thanos as he keeps her and is torturing her. Next up, we finally, I think we hear the White Wolf. So the White Wolf here is Bucky Barnes. Now, the original White Wolf was an adopted person. His family crashed in Wakanda, and then that one of the kids survived, and Black Panther's father actually allowed him to live, and then live in Wakanda. He later on became the White Wolf. Now, one thing that was straight out of the comics again was Ebony Maw tortures Doctor Strange. Now, in the comics, we actually had Ebony Maw kind of torture him and get into Doctor Strange's brain to convince him to give him the time gem, which was really cool as well. Now, another thing was the big return of the Red Skull. He is dressed like Death, and while we didn't get Mistress Death, we did get a version of the Grim Reaper of Death in this, in the form of Red Skull. And this is on Vormir, which are actually home to a weird sort of red villain called the Vorms, who actually faced off against the Avengers in the comics as well. Now, while they're on Titan, Spidey actually attacks Thanos and shoots web fluid in his eyes, just like the comics, but Thanos then grabs him, and that is that. And we get the infamous finger snap. The finger snap being one of the biggest parts of the movie and hinted twice throughout it. And that was it. Just like the comics, half of life is wiped out of the universe, and that's it. It's done. Until Nebula gets control of the Infinity Gauntlet and is convinced to undo what Thanos actually did. But after this, after the kind of Infinity Saga, Thanos becomes a humble farmer, and he is no longer a threat to the galaxy, and is visited by Adam Warlock in the comics, but there's no Adam Warlock here, albeit I do think that Captain Marvel may be taking a bit of that role in this, with Captain Marvel in the post-credit scene. Her logo is shown on the device just before Nick Fury dies, and he is sending out the Code Red call to the Captain Marvel Carol Danvers, the movie out next year. However, that is it for this video. Please drop a like, please subscribe. I'll see you soon, and goodbye.